I personally believe that the issue of trying to own life is the single biggest crime of ecocide and genocide. Why is it a crime of ecocide? Because life is self-organized. Life is not a manufacture of Monsanto. And to redefine life as a manufacture just at the time in contemporary history when we are on the verge of catching up with advanced civilizations that recognize that we are part of the earth family, we are part of nature. We had not slipped into the error that nature is dead, that whatever happens to nature is done as raw material for the industrial society. That 200 years era of anthropocentrism, of colonialism, of imperialism is all coming to an end. And there is no place better to witness this than in the United States today. You look at one side, you've got a strange presidential election working towards the worst level that humanity can take. I don't think if there was a race downwards, anyone can beat that one. And on the other side, there is the amazing gathering of indigenous people at the node to the Delta Access Pipeline, where hundreds of thousands have gathered. And I want to pay tribute to all of them, because they are rising. They're rising not in anger. They're rising and saying there is a law of the Creator. Now, it depends on how you want to talk about the Creator. You can talk about the Creator's creation. You can talk about the creation as Earth family. You can talk about her as Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. You can talk about her as Pachamama. Whatever you want to say. But we know that human beings are part of that larger fabric of life. And today, for a handful of poison makers, the poison cartel, to have become the three biggest players in our food and health system, purely through the illusion of inventing life, collecting royalties through patents on seed, that's where they became big. They had to do nothing. They take a patent, not one, but they have 500 patents on everything. On everything, they just extract royalties. Part of it from nature, by denying nature her ability to reproduce, renew. They literally are putting in the courts language of self-replicating machine invented by Monsanto. A seed is Monsanto's invention in their logic. Now, 87, I was privileged enough to be invited to a meeting where they laid out their plan, the chemical cartel, that we have to start owning life. And royalties on seed will be our biggest source of profits. And in order to own the seed, we use the new techniques of recombinant DNA to move genes from one species to the other, because now we can fool the world and say we have invented a new life form. Because I heard this lie, I went back to India and started saving seeds and started Nathalia. But they also mentioned very clearly that they needed free trade agreements to impose this perverse, illegal law, Monsanto law on the world. And they talked about GATT, and they talked about intellectual property rights. Monsanto was on record saying, in writing the TRIPS agreement, the trade-related intellectual property rights agreement, we are the patient, diagnostician, physician all in one. And they are the ones talking about fair trials. Well, because we'd heard them, I started to work with my ambassador to the GATT, an amazing man called S.P. Shukla, and we put in the GATT agreement that countries have the freedom to not allow patents on plants and animals and essential biological processes. Countries like mine put in place Article 3J, which says plants and animals are not inventions. Fernando will tell you much more about the Argentinian case, which is exactly the same. Having lost 20 years ago, they're now suing our governments for the laws laws. And that's why we have to hold them accountable as people to say, your immorality of claiming to be the inventors of life on earth is not acceptable to us. We do not accept patents on seed. We do not accept patents on life. We do not accept you to be an inventor of our seeds when all you are is a poisoner and polluter of life on earth. You will hear much more about the issue of poisoning life. How can polluters claim pollution to win a right to ownership? You will hear that more from Percy Spicer, whose canola crop was polluted, and instead of the polluter having to pay, the polluter claims ownership on Monsanto's crop and sues him. Louisa and Percy, this assembly is an honor to your lifetime struggle. No patents on seed are the counter to the lie when Monsanto says farmers want our technology, and all they do is plant a farmer's lobby to say we love GMOs. I have often said GMO could be interpreted as God move over, and again God could be your favorite God. It could be creation, it could be life on earth, it could be the feminine divine. But basically they say now we will pretend we are the creators while we destroy the world. Their GMOs are nothing but pesticide producing plants. That's the lie, that GMOs increase food production. All they've got is herbicide tolerance and Bt toxin. All that these crops have done is increase the load of poisons in our food. And they're not effective as tools. As tools they are failing. The Bt crop has failed to control the bollworm and has led to increase in new pests like the whitefly. The herbicide-tolerant crop has led to emergence of superweeds so huge that half the farmland of the United States is overtaken by superweeds. Now, this is the limit of scientific illiteracy, to not realize there's something called evolution. That pests will evolve to get resistance. Weeds will evolve to get resistance. That's why the mechanistic worldview is part of what we are burying today. We are saying no more of thinking of the world as a machine under your control. Life in its diversity is a celebration of which we are a part. And co-evolving with that richness is our intelligence, in breeding, in producing more food, in producing healthier food. Now, the illegal royalties that have been collected by Monsanto's existence in India began illegally. It began illegally in Brazil, it began illegally in most countries. The royalty collection is illegal because they don't have a patent in India, but they collected royalties. The result has been 75,000% jump in the price of cotton seed. That high cost with the failure of the Bt to control pests has led to increased debt burden for our farmers. 300,000 farmers have committed suicide in India as a result of the entry and monopoly of Monsanto. I want you to know that outside on the Navdanya desk are these scarves, which we call fibers of freedom. They're from organic cotton seeds, non-GMO, organically produced, hand-spun, hand-woven in Gandhi's ashram, where he brought out the spinning wheel to get rid of the British Empire. It's hand-printed with vegetable dye. We call these fibers of freedom. Seeds of freedom and fibers of freedom is something that's in our hands. We can't be stopped from saving our seeds, no matter how many laws they try and put into place. Tomorrow there'll be a long one-day workshop on seed freedom, and those of you who are part of the Seed Freedom Network will share with each other how to continue to strengthen this movement, because all food, all seed is based on seed freedom. The no patents on seed is not just a correction to the Monsanto issue a piece of paper, also called a patent. It was called a letter patent that Columbus got. Sailed, he thought he was coming to India, landed in America. He's now called the discoverer of America. And what we see clashing in the United States today between the presidential elections and the indigenous peoples rising is that end of 500 years of colonialism. The idea of issuing pieces of paper to take rights on the earth, on other people's cultures. We are going to go into the future as one earth family. That's what we are here to do. We have 2 whole days to work it out amongst ourselves. And each of you, when you go back, is going to be part of the movement for the next 500 years of humanity. Because if we don't build this movement, there is no humanity in the future under the rule of the 3 poison cartel. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Percy and Lewis. Thank you.
So these are some of the things that farmers were faced with, but we never ever expected that would happen. Now, I'll briefly go over it, and all of you have heard some of the presentation, but there's a lot of new things that have happened in the 18 years that we've had it in our area, 20 years since the introduction of GMOs into Western Canada and the U.S. Now, Monsanto laid what they called a patent infringement lawsuit against my wife and myself, and was against both of us, and where they said we were growing Monsanto's GMO canola without a license from them. We were known in Western Canada as seed developers in canola. I had been doing it, started in 1946, developed new varieties of canola suitable for the western climate conditions of Western Canada. And so it was like a bombshell when we got this lawsuit launched against us, and we said, we didn't even know what it was all about. We didn't even know what GMOs were at that time. And so we stood up to Monsanto, and eventually it went to the Supreme Court of Canada after 7 years. We went first to the trial court, the appeal court, and eventually the Supreme Court of Canada heard the case. Now, everything that Monsanto came after us at that time, we did not have to pay Monsanto any money. And I should say, what they did win was this. Monsanto's patent, and this is very important, this Supreme Court of Canada, Monsanto's patent on a gene is valid. Wherever that gene arrives in any higher life form, Monsanto owns that higher life form. They said it should go back to the Parliament of Canada to bring in new laws and regulations to protect anybody from a patent on a higher life form. That hasn't been, although it has been presented to the Parliament of Canada, nothing has been done on it as yet. So if you are contaminated with a gene, whether it's contamination by wind, by pollen flow, or whatever, you no longer own your seeds or plants. They become the ownership of a corporation, in this case Monsanto. Now, that is very scary, because how far can you go? A seed or plant, what about a human life? And that's why we're very concerned. That means if they put a patent on a gene that enters any form of higher human life, do they own and control you? Do they own you? Do they own me? These are things we're now battling in Western Canada. I should say not Western Canada, all of North America. And we're very, very concerned who owns the future of life, who owns life. So, one other thing, or 2 other things that have happened in that case, the Supreme Court case. Besides the patent infringement, there were 2 other areas. Monsanto, during the course of the patent lawsuit, laid 2 lawsuits more. One was for $1 million. They wanted a lawsuit of $1 million against us because we were stubborn, we were arrogant. We stood up, we wouldn't do what Monsanto wanted, and so they sued us for $1 million. They wanted $750,000 for legal fees, $250,000 for disbursement costs. So that was another lawsuit we stood up to Monsanto. Then if that wasn't bad enough, when Monsanto found out how we were financing our lawsuit with them, they laid another lawsuit where they tried to seize our home, all our farmland, our bank accounts, totally destroy us. So that was another lawsuit that we had to stand up, another $1 billion one, and it's trying to take all our property away. And so that all went together with the lawsuit eventually of the patent infringement that ended up in the Supreme Court. And if the Supreme Court would have ruled against us that we didn't have to pay Monsanto any money on all our cases, we wouldn't be here today. And what really bothered us is when they made this threat, they said nobody stands up to Monsanto. We're going to get you, we're going to destroy you somehow, someday. So you can imagine how I felt, or our family felt, when I was gone from our home, traveling around the world, bringing this message, what my wife was going through to stand up to Monsanto to the threats. They would come into our yard and sit for hours watching what she would be doing. They would go out to our farmland, sit on the road beside the farmland, and watch what we were doing. So it was that fear, when I said that fear culture, they did that not only to us, they did it to many, many other farmers, where they thought that they might be using Monsanto's GMO, canola, soybeans, corn, or whatever. And so it's what we call now a culture of fear, the fear of a corporation coming after you, and this is real. You can imagine how many farmers would be, if Monsanto thought they were friends of us, they would go to those farmers and say, if you support Percy and Louise Schmeiser, we're going to come after you and you won't have a farm left. And you can imagine what a farmer will feel like when you got a $1 billion corporation coming after them for supporting us. So anyway, that is part of the case. Where does it stand now? Well, I said that the Court of Canada has ruled that Monsanto's patent on a gene is valid, and I mentioned that before. And wherever the Monsanto gene arrives in any higher life form, Monsanto owns and controls the higher life form at the present time. Final few comments I'd like to make. And there's 5 of them, and I think they're very important. First of all, never ever give your right up to own your own seeds or plants, because if you give up your rights to your seeds or plants, the future of life will be in the control, and food will be in the control of a corporation. So number 1, can living organisms, such as seeds, plants, genes, human organs, be owned and protected by corporate patents on intellectual property? That's an important issue that has to be addressed by countries around the world. Who, in other words, who owns life? Can genetic modified traits invade, become noxious weeds that then become resistant to weed killers? Are now called super weeds. We already have that, and we have to use new powerful chemicals to control it in Western Canada. Number 3, can farmers' right to grow conventional or organic crops be protected? Under the present situation, it cannot be protected because you can't stop seeds blown in the wind and contamination and so on. Number 4, can farmers keep the ancient right to save their own seeds and develop them further if they want to do so? So the future of seeds are in jeopardy of being introduced if you have a control of that seed by a corporation. Number 5, and to us, my wife and I, it's very important. Who owns life? All life comes from a seed or a plant. No company, no corporation, no person should be able to control the future of life. Life is sacred.
Monsanto viene a cubrir sus propias necesidades, no la necesidad de la agricultura.
What we argue is that Monsanto just wants to cover its own needs, not the needs of the agriculture.
Y esto quizás sea lo más importante. Monsanto dice que la obtención de plantas con tolerancia al glifosato está expuesta a un problema que Monsanto viene a resolver.
And this is perhaps the most important argument. Monsanto says that this need to create plants which are higher tolerance to glyphosate is the answer to a problem that was already there.
Nosotros le decimos al juez, el problema que quiere resolver Monsanto lo trajo Monsanto al mundo y no le vamos a dejar a que Monsanto venga a solucionar un problema que él nos ha ocasionado a todos.
So we're telling the judge that the problem that Monsanto wants to solve is a problem that Monsanto itself created, and we are not going to allow Monsanto to solve a problem itself created.
Esto para nosotros es una confesión y aplicamos esa regla jurídica que a confesión de parte, relevo de pruebas.
This for us is a confession of guilt, and then we can apply the legal saying that when there's a confession, you need no proof.
Y esto viene a cuenta de lo que dice Monsanto después. ¿En qué consiste ese problema?
And this has to do with what Monsanto later explains as the problem itself.
Monsanto dice que cuando inyectaron los transgenes con la misma secuencia genética que hace la planta tolerante a los agrotóxicos, el genoma reaccionó.
What Monsanto says is that when they injected these transgenes into the genome of the plant, the genome reacted to these new modified genes.
Y consideró a esos transgenes como objetos extraños. Y se produjo un silenciamiento génico, o sea, un silenciamiento de genes. O sea, un efecto inesperado, dice Monsanto.
And the genome recognized this new transgene as a foreign body and reacted by silencing these genes so that they were desactivated.
Y en el expediente que está ante la corte, Monsanto hablaba de la seguridad de esta técnica. Decía que el genoma era estático, que uno podía insertar un gen en el genoma y se comportaba en forma estable.
Monsanto was saying that this practice was actually safe, that that the genome was static, and that you could simply insert this transgene inside a genome.
Es decir, Monsanto nos está reconociendo de que el genoma no se comporta como un juego de Mecano, donde uno inserta un gen y todo permanece estable.
But this problem that they themselves identified showed that the genome is not like a toy model which you can just add a block and expect that it just stays stable.
Y también nos está reconociendo explícitamente el efecto inesperado del silenciamiento de genes.
And it also recognized the unexpected effect of this gene silencing.
Y esto a nosotros del campo jurídico nos lleva a tres características de esto, que es la impredecibilidad, la incontrolabilidad y la inseguridad.
And from a legal standpoint, this shows us that this practice is unpredictable, uncontrollable, and not safe.
Y no necesitamos probar el daño en esta causa. Simplemente con invocar la precaución, más allá de que sabemos de que esto produce daño, pero como estrategia procesal y como abogados, le vamos a pedir al juez que no lo patente.
So we know that this practice causes damage, but from a legal viewpoint, what we argue is that this gives us enough proof to ask for caution, and that's why we ask for the judges not to patent these genetic sequences.
Y ya concluyendo, o sea, esto es muy simple. La secuencia genética, como ven acá en la figura, se va a expresar en cada estadio de las plantas, ¿no? En la semilla, en el brote, en el bulbo y en toda la planta.
And to conclude, we see that the genetic sequence is not only present at one stage of the plant, it's present in the seed, it's present when it's growing, and it's present in the fully formed plant itself.
Porque la secuencia genética se expresa en la planta. Y cuando la planta esté linda, toda ya grandecita, inclusive hasta fumigada, le puede pasar lo que le pasó a Percy. Digamos que viene Monsanto, Bayer, te toma la planta, ve tu secuencia genética y te reclama la propiedad de la planta.
And it can happen that, of course, the genetic sequence is present in the fully grown plant. And it can happen like it happened to Percy, that when you have your fully grown plant, the Monsanto comes along and says, no, that plant is actually our property.
Y siguiendo los pasos de Percy y las enseñanzas de Bandana, no se lo vamos a permitir en Argentina.
And following Percy's steps and the teachings of Bandana, we will not allow it in Argentina.
Muchas gracias.
cannot have their rule through illusions, especially toxic illusions. And that's why your presence here is so important, because you are not just listening. Each of you has to become a major activist to say no patents on seed, no patents on life. I'm going to save every seed I can to keep it free. And do look at the massive, massive volume produced collectively by the Seed Freedom Movement. It has all the details in it. Thank you.